welcome to another episode of the Inkwell podcast. I'm your host, Todd Rayner, and today we are joined by another great guest, a returning guest, by the way, John. Let's get John in here and get going. How you doing, John?
I'm fine, sir. How are you doing?
We're doing good. We get to talk to great indie creators like yourself. So, I mean, any day I get to do that is a good day.
Yeah, talking
Um,
comics is always cool.
Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, there's such a variety out there, and we'll get into the variety that you are offering right now. But before we really dive into that, can you give first time viewers, since you are a returning guest, I'll make sure to link to your first appearance here in the description once this video posts. But for all those first time viewers, like a little backstory, what you do, kind of how you came up, and a little bit like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I write comics and I publish mainly self-published comics. I've been writing. I always tell people, when I'm at a convention or something, and they ask, "Well, how long have you been doing this?" I always tell them forever,
Yeah.
because it feels like it. But one, I'm old, and I've been doing this since probably I was in school. When I got out of high school, I started trying to do a little more, but it's always been kind of a part time thing, mostly because
Mhm.
I've always held a full time job. But uh, in the '80s, I was published by like Fantagraphics and Kitchen Sink and Malibu and uh, Caliber and Innovation. I always tell everybody that I did the Christmas issue of the Quantum Leap comic that
Oh,
Innovation published. I had Sam
nice.
jump into Santa Claus, so that was a fun issue to do. Worked with a lot of smaller, some of the indie publishers at the time. Took a break for a few years, right around the end of the around like probably 2000 or so. And then when
Hmm.
I came back, I started republishing some of my older work and getting it cut. A lot of my older work was in black and white because I started in that black and white boom when everything, when there's so much comics were being published in black and white. So
Yeah.
started publishing stuff, printing it in color, and started publishing it myself. And then just kind of went from there. Started creating more new stuff and self publishing it. I still work with publishers. I'm not I'm not like opposed to working with publishers. I've did a good bit of work with Antarctic Press lately.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
with a company that was Insane Comics for a while. I did a book with it's a company called It's Alive, while they were still around. And I actually just signed a contract with Source Point Press to do
Oh,
a
nice.
trade for Alma, but that's probably not going to come out for at least next year because since Hernan did the first issue with me, Hernan Gonzalez, the artist on it, has become
Hmm.
a really hot artist, which I can understand because he's very good and he's doing work for like IDW and Boom and a bunch of different
Okay.
companies. And he's got to complete his contract work so he can try to fit me in. He's being gracious
Yeah.
enough to try to squeeze Alma in, so we can get the trade out, and then he can get back to work that actually pays him a decent salary, probably.
Yeah. I like to tell people we're in the indie comic scene because we love it. It's passionate. We don't always
Yeah,
make money, and some days we do, some days we don't, but we
yeah,
love doing it. So yeah, you've been around for quite a while, decades. Back with the original kind of like indie scene,
yeah.
before self-publishing, and I remember growing up reading a lot of those comics. I felt like the indie scene always gave me something a little bit different, which is I think why I gravitated more towards the image guys. Because although they were popular, but they were still like stories that weren't told by the big two at the time. And
Hmm.
I think with the explosion of crowdfunding platforms, us creators can have more outlets, and we have seen an explosion of self-publishing indie creators. And I think those stories like yours definitely are different than what's the main big two are really publishing, or even Image is now kind of like the main three. But yeah, let's tell you what, let's get into what you got going on here and uh talk us through it.
Well, this is my it's the Diebold Comics digital library. There's no
Hmm.
print versions of these comics. Everything is going to be digital. I noticed, like, when I did my last Kickstarter, and then I even noticed on a lot of Kickstarters, a lot of their contributions, I'd say up to maybe 20 to 30% on some of them were
Hmm.
digital comics.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about it and I was like, I don't expect to make a killing on this because they're $5 pops. So it takes a lot of these to sell to make money. But digitally, it has a lot of advantages. One, all these books are done 100% done. When the campaign's over, if I reach my goal, we don't have to worry about having to send it to the printer. We don't have to worry about sending it.
Hmm.
Me packing them up and shipping them. Basically, as quick as I can load it up on an email and push a button, you'll get your books and
Hmm.
which will be a lot quicker. Also, it saves me a lot of money because I don't have to pay for printing and shipping.
Right.
So
Right.
these books are already done; they're already ready to go. So it's going to make it. I think hopefully this will help fund a little bit of so I can pay some artists to finish books and stuff.
Hmm.
Like I said, I'm not expecting this to do. My last Kickstarter did I think 5,000. No, I about 3,000, and
Hmm.
I'm not really expecting this to do those numbers. Just there's no variant covers. There's no variants on this. It's basically just the comics. I've got
Hmm.
single issues for $5. I've got three trades for $10, and then there's some bundles at some different odd prices. But the bundles are always cheaper than if you were buying each one separately. So, in
Right.
fact, the one so far I've got one backer, and he's backing a bundle where he's getting four comics for
Hmm.
$17 to $20. So it's I'm hoping it does fairly well. I'd like to make a little bit so I can pay some of the artists and keep making some comics.
Yeah, that's really the goal, is just to, a lot of us have that mentality, we'd like to break even, we'd like to make some money, but we want to basically fund what we do today to pay for tomorrow, and
Yeah,
it's a larger community, I think, than a lot of people tend to realize. The indie community scene, especially on social media, there's just, once you start kind of diving into that indie scene, you just start realizing like so many people are out there creating indie comic books. And even on Kickstarter,
oh
like any
yeah.
given month, there's about 300 comic books being, uh, launched on Kickstarter. So, yeah, I mean, this is a great platform. Zoop. I've worked with them a little bit, and backed other people's campaigns and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, tell us about some of the stories. I know you're launching an issue 2 here of Akimi, right?
No, this is still the first issue. We haven't
Hmm.
the second issue. The artist Jorge has finished it up. I just haven't got it all together yet. But
Hmm.
Akimi, we tried to fund my comics last month. Tried to do a print version of it. Uh, Unfortunately, it didn't do too well on it, and I'm not going to sit here and blame Fund My Comics. Uh, I think there's blame to go around all around. It's a newer site. Not as many people on it. Maybe I didn't
Yeah.
market as well. Maybe I didn't push it as hard as I could have. So I mean, I've seen Fund My Comic has done some pretty decent campaigns on their site.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it was an experiment, kind of like Zoop. I'm trying to try some of these other crowdfunding sites out to see if any of them are can compete with using instead of Kickstarter. Not that I have anything against Kickstarter, but I just want to try some of these other ones out and see what they do. So
Hmm.
we're doing the digital version of Akimi right now on the Zoop. Next month we'll be doing the print version. We're going to go back to we're either going to go to Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and we're going to
Hmm.
do a print version of Akimi one and Akimi two. So you'll be able to like get either what issue one or two or a bundle, the two of them together for a little cheaper price. So that'll
Okay.
start probably on June. So right now though, you can get the digital version of Akimi and still read it and still see Jorge's amazing artwork on it. So I decided to kind of add that in there, kind of as just a little plus before we even get to the print version.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about the different crowdfunding platforms, and I think it's all about kind of finding a platform that works really good for us and the people that support us, right? The fans out there, because although Kickstarter is definitely the biggest, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find the most success or financial success on Kickstarter. That's something I've also experienced as well. You go to another platform, you don't quite see the success that you do with another one. Um, but yeah, you mentioned issue two is already done, and you're going to start working on issue three shortly. And I mean, any other stories here you want to highlight, kind of talk about or go into?
Sure.
To
I've got Alma is my what if Buffy was a 72-year-old grandmother.
hmm
It's one of my better selling book issues when I do conventions. It's
hmm
48 pages. So it's still being for $5 for the digital version. Most the least amount of any of my books is 24 pages, but the Alma ended up being 48. It's actually 32 pages of comics, and then there's the rest of it is filled up with text and letter pages. Alma
hmm
was named after my mom, and I had the book finished before she passed recently, and I had the book finished. But so there's other parts in it that's kind of like a tribute to her. I put like I think three or four pages in there, or her favorite recipes. I've got some.
Nice.
She was writing about her life, for us, for the kids,
hmm
and put excerpts from that in there, letter page. So it's a really I like the book. I think the book turned out real well, and it has a little special meaning to me beyond just the comic. And Buffy is like one of my favorite TV shows and favorite characters. So to kind of do this twist on her, the Buffy legend was really
hmm
cool. So that one I think is well. I mean, I'm not gonna say that one's better than the others because at the end of the day, one of the things people always ask me at shows is what's your favorite book, and that's a
Yeah.
real hard answer. I always tell them usually it's my favorite is whatever I just finished, but Alma is probably up there with it. I also have A Girl and Her Dog, which that came out a few years ago. That
hmm
is basically just a relationship between a girl and her dog. Even after death, how the relationship continues. Jenny Blake, who's formerly known as Tony Isabella, who created Black Lightning and did work for she created Misty Knight and Tigger for Marvel.
hmm
She called it one of the best comics of the year when it came out, the year it came out. So
Nice.
it's a quiet, kind of a quiet story. There's no, fighting or anything like
Yeah.
that. But it's if you have a dog, I always tell people it's type of you'll like the story. There's laughs in it, but unfortunately, there also is you might cry through parts of it too because your dog is you're usually going to outlive your dog. So, but at
Yeah.
the end, I think it's a very uplifting story. I think it's a really uplifting story about the relationship between a pet and the person.
hmm
So,
Yes.
and then of course, Akimi, I love. That's the newest thing.
hmm
We've got that. In the digital form. I just did a convention staple in Austin, Texas this weekend, and
Yeah.
I've actually printed up a few copies of Akimi before we actually go through a crowdfunder, just so I could try to sell it at conventions. And
Right.
it's probably my best selling book at this at Staple. I sold quite a few issues of it. People,
Nice.
were really into it and they into art and they were liking it. So I really think that's got a lot of, once we get to the another crowdfunder and get to print, I think the print version is going to do really well. Like I said, we've got the second issue done. We're already starting on the third issue. So our plan is to do them in like 4 issue arcs. So that way
hmm
we can, trade and you'll have kind of a story within each 4 issues, and then we'll go to the next 4 issues.
Right.
Because, today's market, you never know how long, long term comics not seem to be a thing anymore. It's like a lot of just write it and get it done and move on. And I can't I'm partly responsible for that too because I write a lot of different things. So I'll do a few issues and move on to something else. But I like the idea of having something to continue for a while.
Yeah. It's almost like musicians in a way, right? Where you'll have a band and they have this formula, they have this kind of a sound, or they write about us. AC/DC comes to mind if you're anyone
Yeah,
familiar with them. Obviously, they sing about the same thing for album after album after album, and there's definitely that's not all they do, right? I mean, a lot of it is like they're creative people, so that's why a lot of bands will eventually either break up or people will do solo projects. And as a creative person, we have that same kind of thing going on where, there's a lot of different stories I want to tell. Do they all fit into my
Yeah,
universe? No. Do all your
yeah.
stories fit into one book? No. So, yeah, it's always jumping around trying to like corral the creative juices to kind of make something that makes sense that people will enjoy, you know. But yeah, Akimi looks great. We talked about it in the last episode you were on, and the art is definitely, it's unique. I think it's fun. Not necessarily that it's a fun story. I like we talked about with the
No,
story. The story is pretty cool, but really good looking art, and all the stuff here, all your books definitely has different art styles that tend to fit with that story, and
yeah.
I think that's important.
I've been, yeah, I've been very lucky. I've worked with some really good artists.
Hmm.
One of the first artists that I worked with when I was trying to break in is Sam Keith. The
Oh
creator of the
yeah.
Max. Did a lot of
Oh
work.
yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Rest
we
in
did a
peace.
lot of
Yeah.
in the beginning. We did a lot of work together. And I've got like 4 or 5 short stories, and one of the books, snapshots, has got like I think 4 stories in there, which Sam Keith did the artwork for,
Oh
which is
wow.
some of his earliest art that he's done. One
Hmm.
of the stories, maybe one of the first things, one of the first comics. I don't think it was the first thing he published because he was doing some work for like Robotech from Comic Comico and a few people
Hmm.
like that. But we were doing a lot of different things together, and then he became Sam Keith, and really blew up. So it's I mean, he was a very talented artist, very very unique artist. I have Joe Bushkin there. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Hunter S. Thompson anymore. He was a
Hmm.
writer for Rolling Stone back in the '60s and '70s. He was, a lot more on the liberal side. And there's actually a few movies. The Fear and Loathing movie that was out
Yeah.
with Johnny Depp was based on his book.
Oh,
So Joe
interesting.
Bushkin is basically if Hunter S. Thompson retired, moved to Florida, and became a Republican. So Diebold that's the book that I got the name for my company from. Diebold Comics. That was one of the
Hmm.
first. We actually, the artist and I actually self-published that back in the '90s before I really
Wow.
started self-publishing stuff. That was a book that went through like 3 or 4 different publishers, indie publishers, and every time it went to one, they'd end up going out of business. So finally, Brian and I just decided to do it ourselves. So
Yeah.
that one is a cover by Have, but I actually the original version of that uh, has a Sam Keith cover to it.
Okay.
Cover for it. It was in black and white originally. Now it's in color, and I'm actually thinking of maybe reprinting it with the Sam cover on it. Since he just passed away
Yeah.
recently, but
Yeah. He
that was
was
a surprise.
definitely
I haven't
a special art. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I haven't talked. I'm sorry. No, I haven't talked to him in a while, but
Hmm.
so I didn't really know he was sick. We kind of we were pretty friends, in the beginning, and then we kind of just over time you kind of lose track of people, and
Yeah.
I mean there was never any fallout or anything. We stayed friendly the whole time, but he moved one way and I moved another way, and we just kind of lost track with each other. But I was
Yeah.
sorry to hear that he had been so sick for like the last almost decade of his life.
Yeah, he was a special artist. Huge influence on me growing up. I mean, because that's
Mm.
the Marvel Comics Presents is when I really started to notice his artwork. So he was
Oh
already
yeah,
kind of established, I would say, pretty established to be working on that book. And I followed his career. My wife ends up, when we met in '99, she kind of stumbled across my Max collection, and that's all it took for her. And we've she went on the kind of hunt to find the scavenger hunt to find every single Max issue, and it's just he was just a special artist, had a very unique style, a really fun way to tell a story that was very meaningful, in my opinion. A lot of his stories had a deeper meaning than what was on the surface. Yeah, very sad to hear that he passed away. But that's really cool, like that you were able to work with, someone of that caliber, I guess, or someone that
Yeah.
really, you know.
I always tell everybody, and it's kind of a long story to probably go into, but for about 5 minutes, I actually was going to be the writer for the Max. He had asked me to write the Max for him before it started, but there was a lot of stuff going on, and he ended up, Bill Loebs, started writing it, and I can't,
Hmm.
fault him for that. Bill, I'll take my, definitely concede that Bill's a better writer than I am. I mean, his Journey comic book, I think, is one of the best comics ever done. So, he got the better writer out of that deal. So,
Yeah.
you know, but it was kind of exciting for like, about, it was a little more than 5 minutes, but not. I always say I was there for about 5 minutes. I was going to be the writer for it, and it was really, I think a lot of it was at the time he kept telling me, call up editors, tell them you're going to be doing this book. That might get you. He was really trying to get me to get on other work through that. But
Right.
yeah, Sam was a really nice guy. He was a good guy.
In my time, I feel it's a lot of who you know. I mean, you could be very, very talented.
Yeah.
I mean, consistency matters and skill level absolutely matters. But a lot of I've just over the years, you hear stories and you start talking to people, and they
Oh
always
yeah.
catch that break. They knew someone or they reached out to someone, and it
Yeah.
just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
So
It just
yeah.
sometimes that just helps. Actually, showing the lizards is kind of funny. That's lizards is a trade, and it's a collection. I had a store back in the '80s. Fantagraphics had a comic called Critters, and it was an
Hmm.
anthology of basically like funny animal stories. And lizards was my I did it. I just did probably about maybe a dozen stories in it, and that's collects the stories. And kind of talking about Sam, the original premise of Lizards, Sam and I had talked about. We were kind of like collaborating on it, and Sam started getting more work, and I kind of took it a different way than Sam and I were going to do. But the original premise of Lizards was, between Sam and I, and one of the characters in lizards, the one in the front, the lizard with the visor is named Dweezil, and Sam named him, and I didn't realize at the time Dweezil was Frank Zappa's son
Oh,
until
okay.
later. I found out that was his name because Sam was a huge Frank Zappa fan,
Yeah.
and it was long after the stories had been published that I'd seen something about back when Dweezil started doing MTV or whatever, and I was like, wait a minute, that's the name of my character. I was like, no, that's the name of Frank Zappa's son.
Yeah, yeah. Frank Zappa's another legend. I mean, the guy just definitely created a lot of great music. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and Sam
uh,
was a huge fan, so I was never that familiar with Frank Zappa, so it's kind of that was all new to me. So
yeah, yeah.
now,
Eh,
Two
t-
Tons is my uh the public domain characters. It's Herbie the Fat Fury and Fat Man the Human Flying Saucer. So with those characters, it's not going to be a very serious book,
yeah.
and it's not. It's and we basically throw everything in there with the kitchen sink. We have other public domain characters. We use a public domain character in there named Captain Marvel, but he's not a Captain Marvel that's associated with Marvel or DC. He's a completely
Okay.
different character. But we have another character in there, Billy Bounce, who originally appeared in 1901. He was in a comic strip that
Huh.
was created by the original artist for that worked on The Wizard of Oz. The artist that did the illustrations for it
Yeah.
actually
Interesting.
created Billy Bounce. So yeah, it's a fun book. We're actually working on a second issue. We we're actually kind of a third issue because we did an issue where the two-ton characters, Fat Fury and Fat Man, meet Tomorrow Girl for Antarctica Press, and Antarctic Press has published that. And we're
Okay.
working on a third issue of Two Tons, where Two Tons of Fury versus Cthulhu,
Oh
which is going to
wow.
be a
Nice.
very which is going to be a very unique look at Cthulhu. None of these
Yeah.
books of those are should be considered anything but ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the humor. So that we're about halfway through right now. The artist on that is Larry Gidry, and he was working on that. He actually uh, came with me to the Staples show in Austin, and in between times he was over on the side actually inking and drawing some of that comic as we were at the convention.
Nice. That's a great way to pass time at a show when it, it gets a little slow.
Oh yeah, I've actually written scripts while I was at a really slow show.
Hmm.
Where if I'm stuck and there's nobody there, the show actually Staple was like it's an indie only show.
Okay.
It's all indie creators. There's no and it was a really good show. I did fairly well there compared to what I've done at convention. So
Nice.
I was happy. I had a good time. Met a lot of people. So.
Well, yeah, that's great to hear. It's always good when, we are succeeding and getting our books out there, that's always good.
Conventions are so hard. Like, I've done like the big conventions like Fan Expo, and then
Hmm.
I've done little ones, and I'm finding more and more like, Fan Expo. There's one in New Orleans that starts every year in January, and
Yeah.
I'll do it, and then I swear I'm not going to do it again. And then after a few years, I'll do it again. But it's too big. It's like people are going there to get their autographs of
Yeah.
Captain America and all those people, and then they're going to get pictures with them, and and then it costs so much to get. By the time they've spent all their money, they don't have any money left by the time they get to the artists' tables, the comic book
Right.
creators. So, I find I do better, I think, at the smaller shows, where, you're not competing with, as many big names. And especially, nowadays, a lot of shows, comics are almost an afterthought.
Yeah.
Let's get everybody else in and, oh, let's put a few comic book people in so we can call it a comic book convention. And, those are the type of shows that, you know, every now and then I'll do all right at, but a lot of times it's just like people aren't going for the comic books; they're going for everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. There was an article that was written a few years ago about how there's been a shift over the last several years for comic conventions are becoming more of a festival type of thing or more of an event
I
versus,
remember
we're
that.
here.
I think I remember that article. Yes.
Yeah. And it's just this shift, and it's a cultural shift. I mean, it kind of happens throughout the years, things change. And I think what you're seeing now is more smaller shows pop up, 1 day shows or, 2 day shows that are more comic focused because that's what the fans demand, right? As fans, comic fans, we don't necessarily, yeah, it's cool to have celebrities and all these voice actors and stuff like that. But I think comic fans want to go to a comic show, right? They want to go
Yeah.
to see good stories, good art, meet the creators, spend time with them, get them to draw something or whatever, commissions and stuff like that. So yeah, you're starting to see a lot smaller shows pop up in just random cities versus like large shows.
Yeah. Well, and I'm old enough to remember when a lot of conventions for comic conventions, the creators got free tables because we were the draw. The creators were the draw.
Yeah.
So, they gave, nowadays, freaking the table can set you back $400 or $500 if
Yeah.
some shows.
Yeah. It's getting a little out of hand, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Death World is that's one of the trades that goes for $10. That I
Hmm.
did for Adventure Comics, which was an imprint from Malibu. Harry Harrison is a science fiction writer from the '70s and '80s. I think actually even the '60s, and he did a series of novels. Excuse my dog.
Nah, nah.
Whenever I do a podcast, he has to jump up in my lap eventually. But
Yeah.
so Harry Harrison did a series of novels, Death World. He did Death World 1, 2, and 3, and I adapted all three. Wednesday, put your paw down. Do not hit the computer. uh, so I did adaptations of all three books, and so I've reprinted it for as a trade that I sell now for the first one. I haven't redid the other two yet, but I have did
Okay.
these the first one, and it does pretty well. It's a science, it's pure science. It's a science fiction story. Especially some of the older people that come through.
Yeah.
Remember, science fiction fans. Remember Harry Harrison. He's better known for his. He did the stainless steel rat, and
Okay.
I think he's better known for that than Death World.
Yeah. Yeah, 60s and 70s had some really great sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi fan, so that was
Yeah,
that was
that's
a
when
good
I grew
era.
up. I was I was a big science fiction fan when I first started reading, like in high school and everything, and I probably
Hmm.
read almost, at that time you could almost read everything. It was a small enough,
That's true.
market that, or you knew all the creators and stuff, not personally, but you knew their name and whatnot.
Hmm.
And I used to read so much, and not so much anymore, but nowadays I don't even know where to begin because I haven't kept up with it, so I don't know any of the creators. But that's one of the
Yeah.
bundles that I'm offering. So you get all 4 issues for $17, which is that's pretty good. That's almost 48 pages. The Getaway Driver is 32 pages, and Voodoo is I
Hmm.
think 48 pages. Akimi's the only
Hmm.
one that's like 24 pages. So you're getting a lot of comic story. For $17. You're getting a lot of comic pages.
And
And
are you
one of the things
bundling?
too,
Are you bundling similar issues together? Or just concepts?
kind of, like the $13 one, all three of those are kind of humorous comics. They're,
Okay.
the more, humor in them. But, I didn't really have enough to like, oh, these are all like the first one were more of the serious books, Akimi,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
and all those. So they're a little bit, kind of, but they're, Alma's a horror story. The Getaway Driver is a crime story. Akimi is, kind of manga superhero horror. I'm not even sure, and then Voodoo, of course, is horror.
Yeah.
So the kind of, the I guess the closest I could fit. Now, in addition to, I've got a story. It's an 8-page comic that I give away at conventions. Marie Laveau. That if you
Hmm.
sign up for my email list, you get the comic. I give you a free copy of it. Well, I'm also doing it on this site too.
Okay.
Anybody that contributes anything to the campaign will get a free copy of, a digital copy of Marie Laveau.
Okay.
Now
Nice. Yeah.
that because Lizards, the trade actually reprints the first 5 issues of Lizards. So and
Hmm.
then number the one on the right is number 6, which is the newest that we've done with it. That I'm trying to continue it and bring it back. So
Hmm.
basically, you're getting 6 issues of comics right there for $13.
Yeah, that's a great bargain. Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry, my dog is getting water bottles.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I'm sure if I had my door open, my cats would be coming in here and bugging me. Um,
And see, now that's 2 trades. That's Death World, which is a 4 issue miniseries, and Ayla, Speaker for the Dead, which is another 4 issue miniseries. So you're getting what 90, probably close to 100 pages for $15.
yeah.
Ayla is in color. Death World is in black and white. So I have kind of a mix. Some of my work is black and white, and some of it's in
Okay.
color. Uh, like I said in the beginning, like Diebold, the comic, was in black and white, and that was when I started Republic printing myself again.
Hmm.
I put it in color. Those are two. Robot Sex. I've got the first 2 issues, and despite the title, it's not X-rated. I always tell people at conventions that it's just a science fiction story that will, and then Life During Wartime is probably the most political thing I've written. I always, before people even pick it up, I kind of like, I tell them just depending on which side of the aisle you're on, you may not even want to look at it. But the first issue basically it's set in the near future, and the first issue is basically is about a women's right to choose, and the second
Hmm.
issue is about freedom of press. And each
Hmm.
issue, that was another comic, I wanted to continue, and I may go back to it, but the first 4 or 5 issues had originally been planned to be like each issue was going to be like a standalone, and those two
Okay.
issues really, stand alone. And then I was going to kind of go into more of a continuing narrative with it, but one thing I like about both of those issues, the covers on them are really, really good.
Yeah. No, I agree. They're really nice covers. This is a lot. I mean, this is a lot to kind of look at, digest. There's something for everybody. Sometimes we say that without like really fully kind of
Yeah.
understanding what that means, but you definitely have a huge variety of stories, art. So yeah, definitely recommend, people getting out there and backing this, and, picking out a title for whatever genre they like. You got
Yeah.
little descriptions of them, so that's helpful there. But yeah, it's always fun catching up with you and just hearing your stories and hearing, seeing what you're working on, seeing what's the next chapter that John's gonna put out in the next story. So looking
Yeah.
forward to Kimi too, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and in another month or so, I may be reaching out for you again when we do the crowdfunder for Akimi for the first
Yeah,
two
I
issues.
you've shared the cover for issue 2, and that looks great as well. So we'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah,
But yeah, we'll wrap this episode up here, and again, appreciate you coming back on. Always happy to have you back on. And folks, look out for Akimi #2, and more importantly, go support this. I'll make sure I have the link in the description, and we'll share it out and do what we can to help bring some support to this. I'm looking forward to a couple other titles here myself. So I didn't know you had this much story, like these many books out there. So there's a few that definitely piqued my interest. But yeah, appreciate you being on the show, and we'll see you next time.
thank you.
All right, thanks.